What's the most metal thing you've ever seen? Story 1. My grandma, while being the sweetest old lady in the world, is freaking metal as hell. She's the eldest of 5 kids and dropped out of school to help raise her siblings. She's had cancer over and over and over again. Thyroid removed, full hysterectomy, 1 kidney removed, no gallbladder, skin cancer 5 times, and has been living with leukemia for 20 years. My grandfather passed away when they were in their early 60s. She's 88 now. She stepped in as parent number 2 for me and my brother when our parents split. 2 years ago, she got pneumonia and her lung collapsed. Things were looking mighty grim. The doctors told her they'd make her comfortable, but it was unlikely she'd improve. She basically told them, "Whatever, I'm not going away anywhere this week or anytime soon. Do whatever you have to." So they intubated her and had her awake on life support for a month. She pulled out of it and is back on her BS now like nothing happened. We installed a stair chair for her, but she really only uses it to bring her little dog upstairs. She's got every excuse to be bitter about a million different things, but she's just not. Her resolve is freaking metal, and she's my absolute hero. Grandma's metal as they come. She's like a freaking beast and is still alive out of sheer anger alone. Story 2. One of the first times I saw Steve Irwin on TV, he was in a helicopter filming a segment about wild boars. Suddenly, the chopper kicks up a group of boars out of the brush. Steve yelled at the pilot and pointed, and the helicopter dove out of the sky towards the boars, who were running at full speed. Steve waits until the helicopter gets about 6 to 7 feet off the ground, leaps out of a moving helicopter, and hits the ground running at full sprint. Boar who stands about 4.5 to 5 feet off the ground. He lowers his shoulder, knocks her off her feet, and straddles her in one smooth motion. He gets her calm in about 2 seconds, quickly does a segment, pops her back on her feet, and with a gentle slap on her rump, trots back into the bush the entire time, going on and on about how gorgeous she was. That and jumping out of boats to wrestle crocs were the craziest things I ever saw him do. I thought it was indestructible. I was an instant fan. That guy was amazing. Not perfect, but such a big heart and much more of a man and a human than I'd ever hoped to be. I miss Steve. R.I.P. Steve. You're too pure for this world. Story 3. Fun fact. Popping a dislocated finger back into place apparently breaks it most of the time. One time I had my pinky dislocated at the second knuckle by a football. I grabbed it, remembering all the crazy times I've seen tough dudes reset their broken digits, and pulled it back into place, which was a lot harder than I thought it would be. Anywho, after a quick pop, it was back to normal, so I held it up to asses. As my friends looked on, it just popped right back sideways. I popped it back into place again and just made a fist to hold it together until I could splint it. Then went to the emergency room. The doctor says I probably broke the knuckle when I tried to set it, so my friends all thought I was Rambo or whatever because I didn't really react. Just kind of, huh. But the thing is, it never really hurt until it started healing. Story 4. One of my friends has Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, far worse than myself. She slipped down and ended up a curled and contorted mess, having dislocated both shoulders and twisted her legs. Before I could even get down the stairs and help, she started popping her joints back in and entangling herself. It was like watching a marionette build itself from a pile of parts. I asked her if it was painful. She said that after you break enough in previous falls and dislocations, the joint feels paralyzed when it dislocates. Your body feels a super panic need to put it back on right, but overall it doesn't hurt as much as it looks like it would. Either truly metal or nightmare fodder. Whoa, she sounds like a real-life Nebula. Story 5. Some old people are indestructible until the day their bodies are like, okay, yeah, no, we can't keep doing this. My grandma got dentures at age 14. A degenerative bone disease runs in our family. It's awesome. She mowed the grass in their massive yard a few hours before her colon ruptured. Doctors managed to fix that and she ended up with a colostomy bag. When I walked into her room where she and my mom were getting settled, I asked Grandma how she was, and she pointed to her colostomy bag and happily yelled, "Look, I have a Johnson." This is my family. She ended up diagnosed with lung cancer 20 years after quitting smoking, and a few days after she was declared cancer-free, her heart said, "Yeah, nah." Her official COD was heart failure due to complications from cancer treatment. The cancer didn't end her, but I guess chemo is stronger than human life, sadly. I miss you, Granny. Story 6. I worked at a music venue downtown in my city. Every Saturday, a mix of punk rockers and metalheads came down for an 80s night. This disheveled dude stumbled in and walked up to the bar. Had long, greasy hair, a busted lip with 2 matching black eyes, was reeking of whiskey, and a bad attitude. I was 6 hours into a Pabst Blue Ribbon drinker shift with a tipping bucket full of change and the occasional dollar. He orders a PBR and hands me $10. I gave him $5 and 2 singles. I go to turn to the cooler and grab his drink, and he yells something along the lines of, "Where's the rest of my money?" I snap back, tell him he gave me $10, and turn the till to show him the empty $20 spot. We didn't keep large dollars in the register because we dealt in pocket change for $3 tall boys and $5 40s. As I go to grab the register and turn it back towards myself, ignoring his demand for money, I feel the damn thing slip between my fingers as I watch this fool lift it over his head. I hear people yelling as they realize what's about to happen. While I drop behind the bar in hopes he doesn't do something stupid, in a matter of seconds, I heard the most animalistic growl and heave as I watched him toss the register over my head, flying right into the glass bar. This is the mother of all oddly satisfying sounds. A giant bar mirror with 6 glass shelves, 50-plus glass bottles of liquor, and assorted beer breaking into bits and raining down all around me. In the darkness, the neon light shining through the glass mimicked sparklers shooting out of the wall where an entire bar stood a moment earlier. It all happened in a minute, feeling like an eternity. Then it all ended swiftly as the bouncers moved in. It was just another Cincinnati Saturday night. Story 7. I was at a show for some hardcore band, I think Whitechapel, down in Wilmington, North Carolina, with a bunch of other Marines. We were just out looking to get buzzed and rowdy, and hardcore shows seemed to be a good place for it. Anyhow, at the venue, Soapbox Lounge, which looks like it's closed now, security would generally let a person climb up on stage every once in a while as long as they turned and did their stage dive and the show went on. So in the middle of the show, some kid climbs up there, jumps around with the bassist for a second, and then gets on the front of the stage, but just poses and doesn't dive. He's just standing in the middle of the stage, drinking in the atmosphere and basking in the chaos. Security starts slowly working their way over to this kid, but the bassist he was just jumping around with plays his way up behind this guy, turns a little and does a, "This is Sparta!" kick out into the crowd. Full-on punts him. The house went nuts. I have no idea what happened to the kid, but that's what you get. I think I got both of my eyes blackened in the pit that night. Good times. You know what they say, it's wild if you aren't sure what exactly happened. Story 8. My dearest mother always had lots of problems with the reproductive organs. She had a lot of surgeries done, to the point where all her stomach area is numb. I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Guess who started having the same problems? Me. However, mine took a step further. I had an unsuspecting cyst growing in my ovary. I didn't feel a thing until it started getting bigger, 5 pounds. I felt excruciating pain, took an ambulance ride, and had long emergency surgery. I had to have the ovary taken out. I was knocked out for 2 days. On the 3rd day, I regained consciousness. After about 10 days, I have to start walking so that the stitches settle and all that jazz. So they bring in 2 nurses and a walker when I'm ready, and I'm like, what? I can walk. I don't need support to walk. They helped me sit up on the edge of the bed. As soon as my feet touched the ground and I tried to stand, this pain that was out of this universe shot through me and knocked me unconscious on the spot. I woke up 30 minutes later. The doctor said they had to repair my stitches and I can't just put pressure on them. However, since I was young, I should be able to slowly start walking in about 3 weeks and return to usual activity in about 3 to 4 months if everything heals properly. So the reason I'm telling you this is because, at that moment, I remembered the countless number of surgeries of this type, some even more extensive than those my mother had. Every single one of them was scheduled for Friday. She'd be back at the house on Sunday. On Monday, she was up at dawn to make me and my sister food and lunch for school and dinner. She would wince, but I never understood why until that moment. She was back on her feet and resumed taking care of her family on Monday, with things hooked and attached to her. I never understood or comprehended the kind of pain and intensity that she went through. It took me almost a year to be able to jog without it throbbing, and this woman freaking defied all pain to make sure her children were taken care of. There was nothing more metal than my mother. Story 9. 2 lines of angry bikers in a 4-lane road have created a road crossing for a family of moose. Bikers weren't actually angry, and my dad was among them. It was his bike club. No backpatch, no peddling of illegal substances, just a bunch of friendly guys who liked to ride motorcycles. I was young at the time. We were in Norway. The extra metal part came at the end as Moose Dad decided that a pair of extra tall handlebars on a motorcycle was a challenge to his authority. The rider was the club Longbeard. He essentially looked like a biker Santa Claus. He revved his bike and Moose Dad began roaring back until the motor noise got big enough for him to run. And now Longbeard is leader of both the Moose Pack and the biker club. These stories are metal, and if you want to watch more, simply hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Story 10. My grandpa survived 3 brain tumors, and he had multiple grand mal seizures. He averaged almost 1 episode a day, if I remember correctly. Regular treatment wasn't working, so his amazing surgeon put electrodes in his brain, which stopped the seizures for a good 7 months. My grandpa was a cyborg for a short amount of time. That, and he was given up as a kid. His parents abandoned him at a state school where they misdiagnosed him with autism and gave him the wrong treatment. He was called in for the draft for Vietnam, pretty much as soon as he was able. They rejected him for his mental health background, to which he stubbornly said, "Screw you, I'm enlisting." And he said Vietnam was easier than his childhood in a lot of ways. He spent his life advocating for autistic rights. If you don't believe me, they wrote a book about him. You'll Like It Here by Ed Orzechowski. My grandpa was a Vietnam veteran cyborg who fought for autistic rights. I love that man so much. Story 11. I was at a concert, Lightning Bolt, and had the fortune of being at a show where a good 60% of the floor was a mosh pit. Before we get too far, it's important to note that if you've ever been in one, there's a code of ethics in a mosh pit. Chief among these is to never take a mosh pit personally. No one is trying to run into you per se, it's just people cutting loose and roughhousing. So there was one who didn't understand this rule. He was about 6'2" and built like a brick house. Anytime he got hit, he'd wheel around, find the likely culprit, and give him a hard shove. This goes on through the duration of a full song, and everyone around him has grown to notice. The next song comes up, and wouldn't you know it, because he's in a mosh pit, the dude gets shoved again. It turns to some kid just trying to have fun when out of nowhere someone tackles this dude down to the ground. He popped up to see his assailant, who was a 5'2" woman who must have weighed $110. Clearly had charged him at just the right time where she caught him off guard and knew her stuff well enough to know when to do it. She stepped up to a guy who was a foot taller than her and threw her arm back as if to say, "What now?" The dude left the pit. I ran up to her and high-fived her. "You're the coolest person here by a mile." She smiled, "Thanks," and shoved me back into the pit. If she ever runs for president, she's getting my vote. It's the most metal thing I've ever seen. Story 12. I was once putting shingles on a roof with my dad, assembly line style. I would lay a shingle and he would pull down a nail gun. Thump, thump, thump. He stops and says, "Got my foot. Boy, hand me that hammer." He pries the nail loose from the roof. I blinked in confusion. "Dad, don't just stand there. It's getting dark. We gotta get this done." He finishes 2 more hours of roofing and then calmly goes to the hospital. He says he wouldn't do it again because he doesn't like getting antibiotic shots in his backside. I wonder if this dude is John, the son of Ron Swanson. Story 13. My aunt got a radioactive seed implanted in her liver as part of last-case scenario cancer treatment. It had to be transported in a huge lead box. Her bed had lead plates on it that were like walls. None of us could touch her or sit near her because she was radioactive. She didn't get any superpowers, which sucked, but her attitude throughout is what made it really metal to me. When things are bad enough that having a radioactive seed implanted inside your body is a good idea, then things are pretty damn bad. She had a 50% chance of passing away 24 hours after having it implanted. She found out a little while later that it didn't work. Her words when she came out of the room after being told she was terminal were, "Welp, that's me stuffed, isn't it?" Story 14. My first band was a horrible skate punk band. We idolized this really together punk band at our school, and their singer Travis was like our hero. He was a giant, like 6'6" and probably 300 pounds. At one of our first real club shows we were opening for them, there was this dude in the crowd who was clearly on something. The face was beet red. It was running around just slamming into people, even between songs. It wasn't moshing, it was some kind of weird impulse. None of us were able-bodied enough to do anything about it. But eventually Travis got annoyed by it, and one does not simply annoy a robo-punk without consequences. Travis grabbed this dude. He made it through a sheet of drywall and slammed into the drywall of the music store next door. The cops showed up, shut the show down, and arrested this dude. Nobody said a word about how it all went down. The dude slammed himself through the wall because, look at him, he's baked. Even the venue employees went with his story. I never got interviewed or anything, but the cops talked to all of the older people and venue staff, and I overheard them. Story 15. When I was a medical student, during cardiothoracic ward rounds, I saw a patient. The fellow warned that it was pretty gruesome. An approximately 70-year-old male, day 15 post-valve replacement, open-heart surgery, with a background of an intellectual disability, poorly controlled diabetes, kidney disease, and being a lifelong smoker. The surgery went fine and he was out of the ICU a few days later. The only thing was that once he was conscious enough, he would try to get out of bed using his arms, which is a big issue when your sternum is held together by wires. After a few days, the surgeons had to open up his chest, remove the wires, and leave it to clear up. So I walk into the room and there's this man. Despite the warning, I was not prepared. The ward round went on as normal, with me in the background, jaw open. The consultant started talking to the patient. He responded in a very exasperated way, flexing his pec muscles. I saw him a few weeks later out in the front of the hospital having a cigarette. 2 years later, I haven't seen anything near as metal. Damn, that's metal. Story 16. I worked at a recording studio in LA for nearly 10 years. We had Slayer in to make a record. The first day, Tom Mariah comes out to the reception area with a white cardboard box and says, "I just printed a picture from my laptop. Or would it have been printed?" I told him it would most likely have been printed in the office and grabbed it for him. It was a printout of a photo of a young girl in a white dress. He then asked for a pair of scissors and some tape. He proceeded to cut the photo out, and then he opened the white box, which was full of candy bars and was one of those fundraiser boxes with a money slot that you see kids carrying to sell candy for their school. He taped the photo to the folded open box and said, "I told my niece I would help her with her elementary school fundraiser. Is it okay if I leave this up at reception? The candy bars are $1 if any of you would like to buy one." We all bought multiple candy bars. Slayer was in for a couple of weeks, and he was the nicest of guys. Story 17. A while ago, there was a picture going around the internet of a dude from Detroit who was taking his niece to go see Cinderella. The niece wanted to dress up, but was too embarrassed to do it alone, so the guy decided to boost her confidence by dressing up as a princess right along with her and going to the show. Everybody's posting about horrible things. Pfft, a man dressing up as a princess just to make his niece feel comfortable? That's metal. Story 18. I actually have 2. The first was in Iraq. Our pencil-neck, Coke bottle, glasses-wearing chaplain was walking through the gym, and there was this massive Danish army guy. I'm talking like he looked like he could give Sandor Clegane a run for his money in a flexing contest. I was curling an obscene amount of weight, and the chaplain was like, "Damn, how did you get so big?" The Dane finishes his last curl, it was at least 100 pounds per arm, with a roar, drops the weight with a crash, and in a booming voice declares, "Some of us still follow the old gods, father." The second one was in Afghanistan, when one of our cooks was begging to go on a combat mission, so we let him tag along. He showed up with this huge ladle woven into the molly webbing of his armor, and we were like, "Okay, bro, we gotta ask, why the giant spoon?" And he goes, "Oh, that's when I end a guy, he'll go knowing he got ganked by a cook." Story 19. Due to some freak Australian weather, my town went through a week or so where lightning rained down on everyone for a week or so. No showers. Literally everyone in the town had a story of a bolt hitting within 30 yards or so of them. It came to a head one afternoon as I rode the school bus. Lightning struck around us half a dozen times, starting grass fires and leaving after images in everyone's eyes. It was like the bolts were chasing the bus, as if we'd angered a drunken Zeus and he was working on his aim. It culminated with a giant fork of lightning hitting some of the high-tension power lines along the road and watching a ball of plasma slowly work its way towards us down the line. Story 20. When I was young, I went to my grandma and grandpa's house for a week with my parents. The second night, my dad says to my grandpa, "Do you still have your World War II things?" To which he responds by saying, "The guns are the Japanese swords." Then he leaves the room. He comes back however long later carrying a massive machine gun and a Japanese sword, then continues to explain how illegal having them was. So imagine seeing this 90-something-year-old guy walk into the room with essentially a weapon slung over his shoulder and a katana in his other hand. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy most bad accidental comebacks ever said. Story 4 is eye-opening. See you on that video.